is Dr. Roma of the Kapihan and Social Media Broadcasters in Filipinas, and we're here together with our host, no other than Senator Joey Lina, a media man himself, no? Host of the long-running show Sagot Ko Yan, ABS-CBN, and today we would like to try to answer that question. As you have seen in our media advisory, is this government, is the new government inheriting a quote-unquote bankrupt government? What can we do about it, you know? So, Seth, let me just give a briefer of the current situation. The Philippines right now has a standing debt of 13 trillion pesos as of 2022. In the 2 years of our lockdown, we have borrowed around 3.2 trillion pesos because for obvious reason that we need the money for the public response. No? Recently, the Department of Finance has proposed a fiscal consolidation and resource mobilization plan, and they have some recommendations for the incoming government. So practically, the DFA is saying that the next government should more or less get more loans or cut the spending and probably improve taxation. So this morning we're going to discuss options on how to address this particular issue. Let me give the floor to our host.
Can you introduce first our guests?
Okay. With us today, on my left is a distinguished gentleman, a banker, and he's also the former president of the Philippine Nickel Industry Chairman Association. He's also an environmentalist, no? And he's much engaged in what we call the bamboo economics. No? He's Mr. Alcantara. And the next guest, of course, is our famous congressman, Congressman Edsel, Lagman, na hindi na kailangan introduce pa. Next is a good friend of the Philippines. He is the president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Canadian Chamber of Commerce, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Mr. Julian Payne.
Julian Payne.
Payne in Canada, French.
Payne.
Okay. Then?
Okay, actually there are two questions we want our resource persons to answer. One is the government, does the government have the capability to pay our loans on a yearly basis? So that's a very practical and direct question. And if to pay, what are the things that we have to do? Do we raise taxes? Do we just allow the economy or encourage or help the economy to grow? As what the incoming finance secretary said, that actually we can pay the loans the outgoing secretary says we have to do a lot of fiscal consolidation and resource mobilization. That means imposing new taxes and so on and so forth, canceling or suspending the trade, part of the trade law, which lower corporate taxes and also individual income taxes. And the other question that we would like, especially Congressman Edsel Lagman to answer, and also the other two resource persons to answer, Butch and Mr. Julian Payne, to help answer, is whether the Public Service Act amendment, which is now a law, but the IRR is still being formulated by the concerned agencies. There are questions regarding the constitutionality of the amendments to the Public Service Act, and in particular, Congressman Edsel Lagman. We would like him to answer that question too. What his group will do, he himself will do with regard to this impending implementation of the amended Public Service Act. But let's focus on the first question. The question is very clear. It is addressed to our resource persons. Alam mo, kahit malaki ang utang, kung may kapasidad ka naman magbayad, ay walang problema yun. And that's a very simple proposition. But kaya ba natin bayaran itong utang na ito? At kung kaya, paano natin babayaran? Yes, Congressman.
Joey, at the start, let me underscore that the new government is not inheriting a BANKRUPT. According to the National Treasurer, Lea Eliot, the government is in good balance, which is to say we are not today. But the problem with the PBM stimulus package is that it could not rely anymore on the 2022 national budget, because 90% have been comprehensively released to the departments and agencies, including the 8.4 billion for the budget for the barangay and SQ elections. Consequently, the government will have to create new funds or search for new funding sources. According to the Constitution, the stimulus package, which is a special appropriation or supplemental appropriation, there has to be funds to be certified by the National Treasurer or a new revenue measure to be proposed in such stimulus package. Unless, of course, the stimulus package will be delayed in order that it will be embedded in the 2023 national budget, in which case there is no need to comply with the constitutional restriction.
If the funds had already been comprehensively released to the various departments, these expenditures for the rest of are these expenditures for the rest of the year, or are there still expenditures that cannot be funded anymore?
Well, I think the national budget for 2022 is fully funded. And the amounts released are still being utilized by the agencies or departments concerned. There may be a balance of about 10%, but these are what is known as mandatories, like for pension, salaries, and economic development, which are untouchable. They cannot be alive because they are mandatories. That's why there is need to really search for new funds or create new funds.
So the problem is with the stimulus package, is that what we're saying now? For 2022, there is sufficient funds even to pay for our loans.
Yes, that is already part of the
22.
2022 General Operations Act, and incidentally, a big portion of the loans on debt service are automatically appropriated. This is way back during the time of the late President Ferdinand Marcos. And until now, that automatic appropriation of debt service is not appropriated.
Okay, so ang problema lang talaga natin, ito stimulus package. How much is this stimulus package that is being discussed?
Until now, Secretary Joey, they have not disclosed any specific amount. All they were pointing at this time is the 8.4 billion for the barangay and ST elections, which we would like to postpone. But there are many sectors, including myself, I am against any postponement because we should not prejudice the democratic process at the grassroots and the youth levels. And even the government is resisting the postponement. The funds are already released, they are already preparing for it. Much of the amount have been allocated for supplies and other preparatory matters for the village and youth leaders election.
One last question to Congressman Edsel before we ask Butch and Julian here. The statement that the funds are available for 2022 for all the things that are included in the budget. I'm a bit hesitant to accept that statement because definitely the revenue collection dropped this 2022. And it has been discussed that there has been a reduction in the collection of taxes, both by the customs and by the internal revenue. Are these reports not true? And therefore, it's correct to say that the funds are available for 2022 when the assumption, when the 2022 budget was discussed in 2021, there are certain assumptions that certain revenues will have to be collected. Are you saying, Congressman Edsel, that the revenue estimated revenue collection was achieved, including the foreign borrowing? Of course, 2021 also included borrowings by government.
This is not the first time that there is a revenue shortfall, but that would not be affecting implementation of the national budget because the government would have resources like foreign borrowings in order to implement the national budget. And possibly there might be an increase in the budgetary deficit because we will be spending more without the necessary revenues from income taxes. That is why, according to the incoming Secretary of Finance, there is need to improve our tax administration. And what would be included in the improvement of tax administration? One is improving the tax collection efficiency of the government. Two, plugging the loopholes in the tax system as well as rationalizing the reduction of more tax exemptions, catching the tax evaders, and also to most probably improve the tax to the gross domestic product ratio, which is now at 80%. That's still good enough. But it is lower than the Asia Pacific average of 21%, and the OECD average of 33.8%, something in that area. 30.8%. So we will have to improve that. That is a challenge to the new government. And also we have to reduce our deficit. It is now in the vicinity of 7.46%. The target is to lower that to 3%, which is the pre-pandemic level. And also we must address the problem of smuggling, because that will eat up the tax collection by about 250 billion annually, 250 billion annually, and that's a huge amount. And also the effect on the local entrepreneurs would be disincentive if we have smuggled goods, as well as there are now smuggled farm goods and products, which will also be a disadvantage between farmers. And we will have to protect our consumers from the substandard smuggled goods. So these are all problems which the government will have to admit and address.
Mr. Congressman, follow-up question. Earlier, I stated that the Department of Finance, the Duterte DOF, recommended three, or probably mentioned three possible options this government or the next government will have. Basically, more loans, cutting spending, and of course, you're talking now about taxation. What can you say about the first two recommendations?
Well, let me go to cutting of spending. I think that is not recommendable because government has to spend in order to generate development. And with respect to the raising taxes, I think at this early stage of the new administration, that may not be allowed. So the last recourse, most probably, would be to borrow someone. But there should be cautious because there is a tolerable limit on the amount of debt stack compared to the gross domestic product. So these are all concerns that the new government would have to face. And I am joining the chorus of praising the new team of respected and experienced economists. However, I think the President Marcos Jr. should be able to heed the advice of his economic team and implement the policies to be put forward by the economy.
Butch, same line of questions. Please comment on the original questions that have been asked, and then you can also add your input.
I strongly agree with Congressman Lagman that the government is not bankrupt. Part of it. In fairness to the Duterte administration, they've actually done well. The pandemic has slowed down. The last quarter, I think, saw a 8.3% GDP growth, which portends a strong recovery. They have achieved the most comprehensive tax reforms that should propel growth. So tax increases should not be raised. The greatest expansion in the U.S. economy occurred during Reagan, who put out the biggest tax cut. And during the Clinton administration, the first thing they did was have a stimulus package that got the U.S. out of recession. So growth is the answer. Even the maligned debt numbers should be understood compared to other countries. Some of the most progressive countries have way more debt than us. Japan has a 266% debt to GDP ratio. Singapore has 131%. The United States has 128% debt to GDP. So we actually have room at 65%. Our debt to GDP is only 65%. So there is room to grow. I've seen private businesses grow from small businesses to very big businesses. I was a banker to the brother of Senator Joey. He started a few trucks. Now he's a billionaire. So growth is the answer. Provided, of course, you use your debt money judiciously and no leakages. Not that much leakages. So taxes increasing is out of the question. We should emphasize growth. This is where the first moves of President BBM seem to be very hopeful and encouraging. You know, his Philip Medalla was my professor in college. The appointment represents what John Kennedy called the best and the brightest, I think, in terms of the economic thing. They have good track records, spotless, and none of them have ever been accused of any scandal or scams. They are very hardworking. And to me, the most important thing is BBM did not consider political payback in appointing these people. These people do not seem to have any political feeling, which is very important. So I think that's going to happen. The other thing that I notice is that, not because I'm Ilocano, but BBM seems to have a good instinct and a grasp of understanding what can turn the economy around in the quickest possible time, using our most abundant resources. I heard in YouTube, one of his statements was, we had to increase agriculture by using industrial plantations and reviving the Industrial Forest Management Act, which provides for large-scale agricultural projects. Agriculture is the biggest sector of the economy, and 30% of the total employment force is agriculture. He also said responsible mining. Mining is only 1% of our GDP of 13 trillion. Canada and Australia, the most environmentally friendly mining companies, 10% of their GDP is mining and mining related. You imagine that if we grow the mining to only 5% of GDP, that's about 750 billion a year. Even if BBM increases even only 1% a year, we will achieve the 7% GDP growth, which is the benchmark to jump from underdeveloped to developing countries under the OECD. So that is so. And I noticed that not many people paid attention to us, but if you go Google it, he made that statement. So he knows, because agriculture and mining are one of our most abundant resources. You know, we have 9.67 million hectares of agricultural land, of which we are using only 5.6 million hectares. 4.25 is dedicated to food crops, the rest to sugar, coconut, etc. So we have 4 million hectares to go. In mining, our total land area is 30 million hectares. Mineralized land is 9 million hectares. We only have 3% devoted to mining. That's only 270,000 hectares. And we are the 5th most mineralized country in the world. In the 60s and the 70s, the pillars of the economy, mining, agriculture, sugar, coconut. And we have fallen by the wayside. So there is so much room for mining to improve. Because, again, like Canada and Australia, that is the main driver of the economy. Mining today provides 1.2 million direct and indirect employment. If you increase that by 5% or 5 times, you're talking about 5 million new jobs. So the potential is there, and I think the president-elect has good instincts when he said that he either has studied it very well, or has good instincts, or maybe both. So that's why some of my friends in the industry are very, very hopeful. You have a potential speaker who is one of the great mining families in Martin Romualdez, and if the president says he will promote responsible mining, I think we will be able to craft some laws. Now, the other problem that we have on the debt, like I said, we have room to grow. The lowest debt among the big countries is China, only 50%. but they have achieved so much. I know the Public Service Act is one where they have allowed 100% capital for telecoms, etc. Our problem is lack of capital. It's a good business, no offense meant, but a lot of our capital is going to malls, casinos, and resorts. If you go to North Triangle, the buildings are going there, you need only about 500 billion to start a new mining company, drilling, excavation. Most of those buildings are 3-4 billion buildings. But domestic capital is lacking. Indonesia just passed a law, which I think the new government should look at. They are going to allow 100% in big revenue generating activities like mining. But there is a time-bound limit. Within, I think, 5 or 10 years, these foreign 100% owned companies should divest part of the capital. They can either list in the stock market or bid it out to locals so that they go down. Because our constitution says we only have 40% for this. But if we can allow what they call, I was talking to an American lawyer, Canadian lawyer in Canada, and he was saying they describe it as instead of open-close, close-open, open-close. Open it up, the capital will come in, develop it, make a lot of money, then let the Filipinos benefit as the equity is being distributed and sold out. It does not disadvantage Filipinos. You know, all the capital going into these other activities, if they want, they can put their money where their mouth is and go into this. Now, my last point is, what new industries can be developed? When I was in mining, when I used to go to the mountains, it breaks your heart. The people have nothing there, no government services, they subsistence fishing, they eat field grass, etc. No medical, but their lives improve because of mining. And the question that my principal shareholder on the board that we were discussing is, what do we need when the mining stops? And this was a concern. So I took a look at it. I discovered that bamboo industry is very big. One, bamboo industry globally is a 61 to 70 billion dollars industry. China has 30 billion, 35 billion of that. They employ 10 million people directly, production value of 30 million, 4.2 million hectares to bamboo. If you only reach 10% of that, of 400,000 hectares, production value is about $3 billion, which is almost equivalent to the output of nickel, gold, and copper. And we have all the land available to go into bamboo. So, plus, based on the topic today, bamboo releases 38% more oxygen than other species, and it sequesters 12 tons of carbon every year. So it's not only going to be a major economic contributor, but it's one of the best to enhance the environment and come up with climate mitigation. One of the most surprising things I discovered, Senator, is, and I had to check, but I saw it in the DNR website. Manila has the highest pollution because of cars. The website has to confirm there are 47,000 hectares under the control of DNR, A and B lands in Metro Manila. Can you imagine if you all plant that to bamboo, the effect on the pollution control? So those are the things. It's easy to talk statements of motherhood, but there's a reason you have CEOs and CEOs. There must be CEOs, COO types in government who will implement the plan, execute it. That's what's important.
Thank you very much, Boots. Maybe we should hear first from Julian. His comments on the discussion.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm coming to this from the point of view of one who basically was trained in economics, understood economics, which is a very deep Keynesian economics. And secondly, from the Canadian Treasury Board, which is equivalent to your part of budget management. First of all, I think we have to address this issue right on. Is the country bankrupt? No. In fact, when we hear of trillions of dollars of debt, when we think of it in terms of our own household budget, we get scared. But in fact, the level of debt in this country is not excessive compared with other countries, as we've said. And generally, in macroeconomic theory, during times of peace and prosperity, you pay down your debt. And during times of war, oppression, things like that, you incur debt. And we look at this country historically, up until the pandemic, in fact, the country was paying down its debt quite rapidly. During the pandemic, we incurred more debt, obviously, and now the pandemic is over, one would expect us to start reducing the debt. Now you can reduce debt two ways, as a proportion of GDP. You can reduce it in absolute terms, or you can reduce it as a proportion of GDP. And it reduces a proportion of GDP if you increase your GDP. You don't just have to reduce debt per se. That's a fundamental issue. Basically, as I last saw the figures, we're between 65 and 75% of GDP. 65. Yeah, that's quite good compared to most countries. It's quite good. It's not good, but it's quite good compared with others, and we should be able to pay that down. So the question then, the second question is, how can you pay it down? And as we've said, you can pay it down by increasing taxes, you can pay it down by reducing expenditure, or you can pay it down by growth, which generates increased taxes without increasing the rates. Now, if you look at economically, if you look at increasing taxes or cutting government expenditures, one way or the other, you're cutting consumption. When you cut consumption, you cut the volume of taxes that you're generating. So you may increase the rate of taxes, but the amount of net revenue you get is not necessarily increased. So I think that Governor Ben Yoko, his point about we really need to generate growth is the key path to success. And if you look at the starting point of this country, its debt to GDP ratio, it's not ideal, it's not terrible. If you look at the reserves, you've got in order of, I think, 10 months of import reserves. This is very good compared with most countries. We're not about to suddenly stop. So the real question is, how do we stimulate growth? And how do we avoid stifling growth, which you may well do if you increase taxes or if you decrease expenditure? And that's where you get into the third question which has been raised, which is what are the sectors where we can really stimulate growth and how can we do it? And obviously agriculture is one, and obviously manufacturing is one, and obviously mining is one. These all generate growth. The real problem is how do you get investment? There's lots of local investment, but you need foreign investment, not just for the hard bucks. You need it for the technology it brings to, and you need it for the links it establishes on which trade grows. And I think that the danger in many countries is protectionist forces, and it's true here in agriculture, and there's an anti-mining. If you look back, there's reasons why this exists. But in this day and age, we've moved on. There is quite a well-developed technology for mining now, which is environmentally responsible. We can talk about clean air later if you want. And we can move towards socially and environmentally responsible mining. And we can move towards more efficient agriculture. And these are the areas we really need to focus on to generate growth. And that growth will generate taxes, far more taxes than increasing the tax rate. That's the key point. And so I think what the Congressman said is quite correct. We're not bankrupt. What we face is a technical problem. How do we manage basically the revenue and expenditure flow? Like in my house, I have to manage my cash flow. My wife spends all this. oops, I didn't make that much money. How do I manage this week's tax bill? And I think that the Congressman has pointed out that there are technical issues that we have to face, but these are issues not of fiscal management per se, the issue of budgetary management and how technically you address that without stultifying the people. Thank you.
Yeah. That the current Department of Finance and the incoming Department of Finance seems to agree with both you, Julian and Butch, about the issue on mining. As a matter of fact, the incoming Finance Secretary, Jokno, was quoted in saying that the industry of mining can be a possible solution for the financial woes of this government, you know. And it seems that one of the major obstacles of the industry of mining is the environment. Let me ask Mr. Butch Alcantara here, who is a banker. He's also exposed into mining, but he's an advocate of the environment, particularly his bank economics. Butch, how can you more or less address this prime obstacle of the issue of environmental impact of the activity of mining?
In fairness to my friend, Gina Lopez, whom I did not agree on a lot of things, not all miners are saints. She brought up the problem. But you cannot make perfect the enemy of good. You have to have a balance between mining and environment. It can be done. Believe it or not, in the boardrooms, I was in mining as the president of a holding company. We do discuss how to make sure that the environment is maintained and enhanced and hopefully restored. Try to maintain it as much as possible. So, the miners are conscious of the environment. Now, I think I am the pioneer in advocating bamboo for mining. I think Julian knows that. My real reason when I look at this is how to make a sustainable livelihood for miners. That was the first, not the environment. Bamboo has 100-year life. Like I said, it releases 38 or more oxygen. And I surveyed one mining company, which is normally on 5,000 hectares. 25% in this company, outside the mining area, is susceptible to planting bamboo. And I took a look at the Institute of Network of Bamboo at the time, and confirmed by some UP professors, Dr. Aida Lapi, they can make 92,000 per hectare in a bamboo farm. In China, they allocate 10 hectares per family. They can make almost $1 million versus a salary of 240,000, 300,000 a year. So it really enhances the life and the dignity of the miners and the indigenous people communities. Plus, you know, of the 31 billion production value of China, they're now making anything from toys, engineered wood, wood beams, to composite products like wind turbines. The ones in Ilocos Norte of the president-elect, they can make that out of composite carbon and bamboo. That is a very strong metal. Even they're now making 6 to 8 feet diameter tubes for water or sewage. So the thing is, you cannot stop at planting bamboo. You will have to invite investors to put up the processing plants. Which is why it's important, as has been reviewed by the legislator. We have to put in place the means where we can invite foreign capital, equity, so that we don't increase our debt further. And believe me, one Taipan I used to work before, he held up we were talking about multinationals, and he held a 1,000 peso bill and said, these foreigners, when there's money to be made, they come here. But, he said, there must be stability. So, regulations have to be more stable. In Chile, which became a developing country due to mining, the largest copper mine in the world, if you look at their mining laws, mine tenements almost have property rights. And this did not come from me, but it's something I heard. You can't have somebody invest hundreds of millions of dollars when they're afraid. No offense to the Catholic Church, I hear Mass every day. But it cannot be that when the bishop wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, he will say, we got to protest and stop mining. So stability is the key to luring capital. And I think Congress can, whatever they say, I trust the collective wisdom of the legislature to come up with the proper measure.
Butch, do you have an environment secretary in mind?
No, I've been a political.
I'm just kidding. But you need a very good environment secretary as well. No? Not
Well,
just,
because the two drivers
who understands what you're talking about.
The two drivers, Senator, can really propel us is agriculture and mining, which is the Department of Natural Resources. So that's why that is important. But even if I'm from Ilocos and I idolized the president when I was young, the father, has never been political.
Okay. We will, yes, Doc. We will ask the members of the media to also shoot questions after maybe another round of question and answer.
What I'm getting here at this point in time is basically mining could be a possible major solution to the financial needs of the next government. However, there is this scary thing about mining, particularly the environmental impact of exploring and going full-scale mining to generate enough money for the country. What you're saying right now, Butch, is mining and the environmental aspect of protecting the environment can go hand in hand. And you are now saying at this point in time, you are even forwarding a specific mitigating solution to help control the environmental impact of mining. And you're saying bamboo could be a particular key, an agent that we could probably inject into responsible mining. Am I right?
Definitely. The mining company that was owned by the holding company when I was president never had a notice of violation by the DNR, which means that everything revolves people. Again, I said, not all miners are saints, but I think the brouhaha that Gina created has really forced mining companies to comply. And it can be done. Enforcement can be done. It can be imposed stricter regulation. So, plus, if you look at we have only 270,000 hectares in mining out of 9 million mineralized land and out of 30 million hectares. So, it's confined, can be confined because mining areas are selected only in confined areas. So, we can really do now. And bamboo, the Bisaya advocating is a very good mitigant and can be a major contributor to the economy. I lived in Vancouver for a while, and Canada is pristine. And British Columbia, where Vancouver is the mining capital of Canada. And it's very environmentally maintained, beautiful place. So we can do a deal. In fact, the Philippines has adopted the towards the TSM, which is a Canadian standard. If you implement that strictly, it can coexist. So there's no problem, I think, as long as we recruit ourselves and implement it correctly. And The nice thing about mining is that if the government pushes it, maybe as soon as 2 years or at most 3 years, they can become productive already. And then the revenues can start flowing. Let me tell you, 2 mining companies that were stopped during the previous administration, previous to the total administration, when there was a ban on the mining project. Tampakan in Cotabato and in Negros, the one of Pangilinan, I forgot the name now, but they expect to generate in revenues combined, I think, as much as $800 billion to $1 billion yearly. And they are close to starting to operate. And that is something we've given away because now the other thing that I'd like to talk about mining is not too many people know it, but there was a no-go zone established during the Aquino administration. I understand, I'm not sure, without consulting the DNR, it was submitted directly to President Aquino, where 80% of the total area of the Philippines is a no-go zone. So that stops mining in this area. And the no-go zone includes areas in the mountains classified as tourist area as the basis for the no-go zone. That has to be reviewed because there are areas where there's a lot of mineral but cannot be touched.
Okay. What GDP growth rate do we need in order to manage efficiently our debt obligation?
The conventional number is supposed to be 6 to 7% growth. I think that's a World Bank number to jump from underdeveloped or least developed to a developing country. If you have 7%, I think for like India has said 7% or more for the last 10 to 15 years. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 5 to 10 years that really allows you to grow. And mining, like I said, if you just bring it up to 5%, that will add so much to GDP growth.
Well, the former Speaker of the House, Joe De Venecia, had this 7 for 7 years.
Exactly.
7 for 7.
He was much aligned.
Yes.
But Joe De Venecia,
That was 20 years ago when we trumpeted that slogan, 7 for 7 growth rate in GDP for 7, consistently for 7 years. If I remember correctly, his slogan. That's, well, it's good to hear. It's good to hear. And it's good to hear that we know where the growth will come from. And you said basically agriculture and mining. In this last few years before the pandemic, we were growing already at 6-7% or 7%, almost regularly every year, 6 to 7%. But of that 7%, what percentage came from OFW remittance?
I'm not sure. I have looked at that, but it's probably at least 100%. Just remittances.
It's not that significant.
It's not a significant.
But given the circumstances we were in,
Yes.
OFW remittance had a great impact on consumption spending.
I remember the crisis of '83 when we ran out of dollars. The crisis of '89. Unlike Mexico, Argentina, who could not import anything and nothing to buy, the Philippines continued to be able to import and the economy kept running. There are two reasons. One, OFW remittances were important. Number two, according to a former U.S. ambassador, so many Filipinos and dollar accounts of blood. So to keep their business running, they brought in their data. So we had as bad a crisis as Argentina or Mexico. They stopped running. The Philippines never stopped running.
Okay. Now, Julian?
I just like to make a comment on the other instances. It's been a remarkably stable flow of inflow of foreign exchange. I was here during the 1997 crisis, we got over and got the remittances. It never significantly slowed. It never significantly slowed in 83. It never significantly flowed during the pandemic. One of the interesting things is the structure of your remittance flow. Your remittances come from North America, Asia, Middle East, Europe, and also the origin of it. It's not just housemates, it's lawyers, engineers. So it's a very, very diversified source of remittances. It's a bit like a diversified mutual fund. In other words, one sector can go down, one country's economy can go down, but overall, all your remittances has been remarkably stable over the 25 years I've been. It's quite an interesting phenomenon compared to, say, Mexico.
Okay, I think it's clear from the discussion that the government is not bankrupt. Okay, that's very clear. The problem, or the incoming finance secretary has a different approach to managing our debt. In fact, he's not very much concerned. His answer is growth is the way to go in order to cushion the impact of any debt obligation. I think that is also very clear, which is different from the outlook of the outgoing secretary, who recommended suspension of the tax cap at the Tendo, suspended for 2022 or 2023, and new taxes, VAT reduction, VAT expansion. I read his the result of his briefing a few days ago. Now, so agriculture and mining are two identified economic sector that will have to be shored up, where the growth would come from, and it depends, therefore, on who will be the alter ego of the president in the area of agriculture and in natural resources. No names have cropped up as of yet, so that's something to watch. Maybe the incoming administration is considering everything. I'm sure they agree with the suggestion here that agriculture and mining should really be tapped to bring about additional growth in the economy. But how can there be growth if there is no equity? I mean, how do we make sure also that the growth in the economy will not just go to a few families or a few businesses, but the growth should also be shared by the masses of our people?
Joey, I think that growth should benefit all sectors of society. And when we talk about growth, that should be accompanied with a strong policy addressing poverty. Because that is the only way we could make growth equitable for all. And I think this is a tall order for the new administration, because poverty has been haunting the Philippines for a long, long time already, and it has to be addressed efficiently and effectively. And let me just go back to the migrant workers. Well, Joe, you will know that this was a stopgap measure during the time of the reigning President Ferdinand Marcos. But it would begin to be implemented by the subsequent administrations, instead of creating jobs here in the Philippines, so that we can stop this labor export and stop also the social effects of this Great War of Migration, for particularly on Filipino families and spouses and children. So I think another way of doing this was probably is for the new department on the OFW to study how we can contain the export of migrant workers and create jobs in the Philippines where they can be absorbed, both those returning as well as those who intend to go out. Because that should always be a stopgap measure which is long overdue to be overruled.
Can I make a comment in that session? You know, the first OFWs were the Koreans. But Park Chung-hee, in 61, who was a dictator, mandated unknowns like Samsung, LG, Hyundai, Hanjin. She supported them with all the financing needed to put up industries. There was one objective, to create the jobs, as Congressman was saying, so that the Koreans would eventually come home. Right now, we are, I think, the second largest OFW community all over the world. Number one is Mexico, but only because everybody is in the US. But the Philippines now is the largest OFW community. That started under President Marcos and the father of Cruz Ope, who is now the secretary. And supposedly, I was talking to some Ilocano politicians a long time ago, that was discussed between the President and Cruz Ope and Ambassador Coco Morales, who was in the Middle East. That is an opportunity, but it was supposed to be a startup nation. But we, unlike Korea, we never developed the large industries to generate a lot of the jobs. That's why, until now, we have no choice.
So mining, bamboo economics, agriculture, they can provide the jobs. And of course, manufacturing.
Well, the Philippine economy is jump. You have agriculture, and then you get into service economy, but you never really develop the manufacturing sector. So until now, that's why we have a lot of imports. Like one commodity, aluminum products. You know, you import all our foil, aluminum foil.
Do you think we can get our act together? Because all of these things that we have been discussing have been discussed a long time ago, like agriculture, mining, service industry, manufacturing. The service industry is also dependent on manufacturing. You will have more services if you have more manufacturing. And of course, tourism is part of the service sector, but it's also very vulnerable to pandemic or any kind of emergencies.
With all due respect to Congressman Lagman, if you notice in the Philippines, there are some species that have developed very well. And there's one key thing. They have young mayors. They're very progressive. Their fathers or politicians have sent them to business school, etc. And they're taking over as mayors. And they are progressive cities. So I
only know one. You can count in your fingers which of these cities are really developing.
Well, there are some, Senator, and I'm hoping and putting the President-elect in that section. Although he's 64, he's been exposed. So I'm hoping that, like I said, when we said industrial, agricultural activities and mining, maybe he really has the instinct and the feel. So, like Tennyson said, maybe a lot of good will come, even if people are wishing evil. And, the words of Socrates, we should get together and wish him well. The secret of change is not to focus on fighting the old, but to focus on building the new. So we should suck it up, put aside everything, and pray and continue to the future.
Hope springs eternal, Coach. But Julian, I think, has
I'd like to go back to the starting point here. I think we all agree, I'm sure everybody in this room agrees that growth is the answer. It doesn't take a lot of brains to figure that out. The question is how. I think we have to give great credit to the outgoing administration for providing three very strong pillars for longer-term growth. One was the tax reform that was put through. I don't agree with every aspect of it, but basically it's a major accomplishment for any government in any country to push through tax reform like the outgoing administration. Second, it is pushed through, it didn't get constitutional amendments through for easing liberalization, easing foreign investment restrictions, but it did push through the Foreign Investment Act, it did push through the PSA, it did push through the Retail Sales Liberalization Act. All of these have opened up the country in the image of the world as well as in substance for foreign investment. That was the second pillar. And the third pillar, it addressed the infrastructure issues of this country and started to build. So we provided with the outgoing administration a base for growth. Now, we come to the point of this discussion. Are we going to change some of those? Are we going to reverse the taxation and increase taxation now as opposed to doing what we did? Are we going to stop the bill? Are we going to become more protectionist on foreign investment? Because those are the three things that we fundamentally need. There's one other thing that would be a great help to growth, and that was opening up this country to free trade agreements. We have the RCEP, which is right now hanging in the Senate, I believe still. That needs to be ratified. There's a CTPP, the Comprehensive Trans-Pacific Partnership, which the administration indicated an interest in. There are various other agreements. By opening up your free trade, you will be opening yourself to more markets. It doesn't mean people just sell here. It means you can sell preferred rates to the other countries. And that is the fourth pillar that really needs to be. Then you get to specific sectors, agriculture and mining. I mean, you can have all those things. If you suddenly put a huge tax on mining, you're not going to get growth from mining. If you suddenly put key protectionist restrictions on agriculture, you're not going to get growth in agriculture internationally. So I think when we talk about growth, we have to look about these pillars, and then we have to look at each sector, how it's being managed. I think this country has great potential in agriculture, great potential in mining, great potential in manufacturing. It's got to be open to international trade, it's got to be open for foreign investment, and it's got to have the infrastructure to make this possible. We have the base, we just have to take advantage of it in the future rather than stopping it or turning it off.
Can I answer on the taxes? Whether you like Donald Trump or not, he cut taxes. And the top 500 Fortune companies, the profits went up so much because they could reinvest. In the Philippines, surprisingly, after training and create, the Philippine companies are growing, not obscenely, but they're making a lot of money and creating more jobs and pushing more investment. So, historically and electronically, you can't cut taxes now. Increase taxes, we're cutting taxes. You can say promoted the growth of the industry. Now, Julian's point, many of the Asian countries are now getting free trade agreements individually with other countries. We have not been doing that. One of the policies, well, one of the problems with the Philippines is policy of the previous administration, university, the Kapihan administration, carte blanche. One of the most effective programs dating back to I call the Apo Marcos and Lagman was the creation of a lot of export trade zones. And that brought in a lot of investors, created a lot of jobs, increased the tax base. That has gone out of favor. Vietnam is doing all it can with incentives and creating export free trade zones to get those coming from China who are afraid of China dominating the world so much. I don't think we have gone into that a lot, but that was a very successful program of the previous Marcos administration. Look at the FTA, prepaid terminal. That used to be buildings for export industries, medium industry. I was a banker to a lot of them. At that time, there were 100,000 jobs in that area alone. And that has been lost. So that is one
Well,
program.
we're removing incentives that are being given to locators.
Yeah. But
That's one of the proposals also of the outgoing administration to reduce or eliminate these incentives.
you may need that to let them come in first. Later on, to report the voice. But the report to that was told to me by a politician. Actually, very 85, almost 90-year-old politician, dating back to the Marcos era. He said it's simple math. If you have none of those, that's zero.
Between something and nothing.
Yes,
better
and
than
if you
something.
multiply it even by 10% only, 0 times 10% is 0. But if you have 100%, giving jobs, etc., the tax rate of 10% will give you 10. So I think it's just a matter of math. Of course, you get them come in, create jobs, etc., and sooner or later, the incentives run out, you need to collect the full taxes. But you have to let them come in first.
Okay. Maybe we can have now questions from the members of the media, please.
We have one from
Approach the microphone.
yes, please, from each side, and we have Professor Edsel.
Good morning, gentlemen. My brother is Cong from the. You've mentioned about the growth. I'm just curious on what can you say about the proposal of taxing the digital services as part of the proposal for the incoming administration to increase taxes. Do you think it will make an impact? Taxing digital services for digital services.
Social media. Well, let me put this way. According to the Oxfam, that's the Oxford Committee on Family Relief, every 30 hours, a billionaire is born due to the windfalls coming from the pandemic. And at the same rate, 1 million people are exposed to the extreme poverty. But this rising profit and rising poverty are two sides of the same coin. Now, I think we should be able to tax more of the rich, particularly those who profited from the pandemic pain. If they got billions or billions from the pandemic, they should be able to ease the suffering coming from the pandemic by paying the correct and adequate taxes. And so, what are these sectors? One, the pharmaceuticals. Two, those engaged in power, as well as in food. And together with these are the delivery carriers, the diagnostic centers, the internet, both Facebook and Twitter, as well as what we call hospitals who profited from the pandemic, including the distributors of medicine and medical supply. In other words, they profited from the pain of the pandemic. They should be able to pay adequate taxes. That is where your question would rely on taxing some particular services. And to my mind, it is high time that we should be able to collect correct taxes from those who profited in windfalls or profited from the pain of the pandemic.
Sir, follow-up question.
Can I add first to what Congressman said? There is an ongoing problem now with certain countries imposing taxes on digital businesses. And it's fair because we make a lot. The problem is operationally. The payments are not caught because it's online, transfers, etc. Now, I was talking to some IT people abroad, and the proposal, and what can be done, is to make sure that all payments must be forced through institutions, banks, companies, etc., where the payments can then be captured and withholding tax can be imposed. Now, the billion transactions every day, I do not the banks can handle that. Now, the other proposal, which maybe a little more takes a lot of will, is the old network method sensor. The brother of Senator Lina does a lot of his business with online payments, and his wealth grew from 5 billion to 10 billion in 1 year. Then his net worth increased by 5 billion.
That's if. Sample of if.
Sample only.
His brother was one of the first bankers of his brother, and I know where he started with transfer forwarding, and he's now a billionaire. So if his net worth increased so much, individuals or corporations, then we can impose what you call this, a net worth-based percentage as a windfall profits tax. But I don't know how easily that can be installed. But it can be done, very clear. If the guy had one Ferrari this year and next year, he now has another Lamborghini, he's not a good, so you can tax him. But there's a lot of difficulty in imposing, especially gambling winnings, because they use what they call the underground banking system.
How about the issue of patriotism, nationalism, love of country, all Filipinos should think about this, voluntary payment of taxes, especially right now that the country is
Honest system. Honest that these are the transactions that you entered into. This is the payment that you receive, and therefore you will report it as an income, and then whatever is the tax rate and apply it. That's very that's very easy.
I tell you, sorry. I moved to Canada in 2005, and they want to call it the period foreign assets, etc. So I talked to the mayor of here and said, how can we do tax avoidance, etc. Because you can report your assets, and then you said it, at the basis you can demand. I was exploring an finance guy, and the Canadian partner told me, Mr. Alcantara, how will we be able to pay for all the free services like healthcare, etc., etc.? That is patriotism.
Yes.
Sir,
I was embarrassed.
So I know the answer to your question is it will take a lot of doing before you can concretize a law that will tax digital transactions. So,
okay. Clarification na po regarding the answer of Congressman. So, Congressman, do you think we are not taxing properly those companies who profited a lot during the pandemic?
I don't think so. Because they always try to hide the real income and understate their taxes. But let me tell you, this is a worldwide phenomenon. Oxfam calls it profiting from paying, the pain of the pandemic. So the government should be able to really investigate, check very well who really became billionaires or billionaires because of the pandemic. And we are talking about those engaged in power, food, pharmaceutical, delivery areas, diagnostic centers, hospitals, and those engaged in the distribution of medicine and medical supplies.
Thank you, Cong. Just to clarify again, or just to put on record regarding the question of digital services or digital transactions. So it is a problem on how we do it, the taxation or the taxing on those aspects. No, but the impact is. Do you think it will make an impact?
Well, you know, all these high-tech guys are some of the richest in the world. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, etc., PayPal, Peter Thiel, they're all billionaires. Even Amazon is digital, so there must be a lot of taxes you can impose on them. And like I said, the congressman said, we have to find a way to do it.
Yeah, let me call our friend from ABS-CBN, Mr. Warren Guzman.
Hi, good morning to the panel. To Congressman Lagman, could you describe the allocation for tax payment, for loan payments rather, interest payments, for loan payments this year, already allocated, and would you be knowledgeable of how it will grow for the next 5 years?
Well, as far as the debt service is concerned, it's still within the tolerable limits as compared to the DDP automatically paid because of the presidential decree imposed by the late President Julian Payne. I think with respect to the principal payments, they are automatically allocated. And with respect to the interest payments, they are in the General Operations Act, but still they will have to be paid because of our apprehension that if we do not pay, we will not be able to borrow some more, and our credit standing will be affected or depressed.
Yes, thank you for that call. But I wanted to ask actually in terms of percentage to the total budget, has it grown to a large portion of our budget already? How much are we spending every year percentage-wise?
For that service, I can give you an estimation. Yes, it has been lowered considerably. I think it's in the vicinity of about 20%, 20% of the national budget. And that's still a huge amount, which should go to social services.
Exactly, sir. And will that remain at 20% in the succeeding years, just based on your knowledge, or will it grow to a larger portion of the budget?
Well, I would expect that it will